MLB Pipeline just put out a huge update to their top 100 prospects list and their top 30 team list right after the trade deadline, completely revamping the top 100 and introducing a lot of new prospects both from the draft and from systems internal into their rankings. Their top 100 is normally really good, and I really like the work that Jonathan Mayo, Jim Callis, and other people do at MLB.com, but I think they did miss on a couple people who should be top 100 prospects. In this video, we're going to go over some of the players who I think deserve to be in the top 100, over some of the people that actually made it into the top 100, and we're going to talk about why I think they deserve it in there. So, as always, if you like this kind of content, go ahead and give it a like, drop a comment, and even better, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It's right there in that bottom right corner of the video. It really means a lot to get more content on prospects like this one. Without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the first prospect that I think deserves to be in the top 100. So we'll start looking at the 2023 MLB draft, and I think there's a lot of players who will end up getting added to the back end of the list as people graduate. I think the first person coming from that list is going to be the Cubs first round pick, Matt Shaw. The second baseman out of the University of Maryland. He wasn't jumping off of a lot of prospect lists coming out of high school for the draft, but he really solidified himself as a solid player coming out of Maryland and signed for just under $4.9 million at the 13th overall pick. What really put him on the radar, and in my opinion is part of the reason why he got drafted so high, is his success in the Cape Cod League in the summer of 2022. For those who don't know, the Cape Cod League is an off-season league mainly for college prospects where they go and use a wooden bat, while in college they use a metal bat. This is important because, as you know, in MLB, they don't use a metal bat. So if you're able to go ahead and translate your game from a metal bat to a wood bat, there's a high chance of success. For Matt, he led the league in on-base percentage and batting with a .360 average and won MVP award. So it immediately showed that he has the ability to be an effective hitter with a wooden bat, which is exactly why he got drafted 13th overall by the Cubs. He's someone that could very easily progress through their system very quickly. And the Cubs are in a little bit of a flux right now, as are a lot of teams in the NL Central. You know, you see the Reds going with an influx of talent going from end of the division to now potentially competing for a playoff spot, whereas the Cardinals have kind of fallen to the side. There's a lot of variability in the NL Central right now, but I think the Cubs with Dansby Swanson are really going to try and make a push, and someone like Matt Shaw can make an impact potentially at the end of 2024 or beginning of 2025. As customary with a lot of recent draftees out of college, he spent a couple games in rookie ball before getting promoted. Spent 3 games there, but the Cubs aggressively promoted him to high A. It makes a little bit of sense. He's going to be 22 in November, so it makes sense to get him facing higher level competition, people closer to his age, and he has done nothing but rake in high A. He's hitting for a .356 average. His OPS is .963 right now, so he's doing a very, very good job of hitting the ball in high A. And I wouldn't be shocked to potentially see him start the year of 2024 in Double A, and that's just support to go and show that he actually might make the big leagues by the end of 2024 if the Cubs are aggressive. We've already seen someone like Nolan Schanuel get promoted from the Angels after just 21 games in the minor leagues, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that Matt Shaw is one of the first people promoted to the big leagues out of this draft class. I project Shaw to be about a league average hitter, potentially a little bit above average. He has shown success with the wooden bat, and I think his hit tool is solid, but I don't think it's going to jump out of the page. You're not getting anywhere close to like a Luis Arias at second base, but you're going to get someone who's solid and going to contribute effectively at the major league level in terms of hitting. And what's really exciting is he also has some power to go along with that. His game power is definitely above average. I don't think it's an elite tool, but I think it's something where you look at what Matt Shaw can do with the bat in his hands, and he'll go ahead and hit for maybe 280, 290 with 20 to 25 home runs, which is something that any team could use. That is an effective player, and the fact he plays second base just goes to show that that's another plus. He also has above average speed. It's not an elite tool. I think that's a big takeaway with Matt Shaw. He doesn't have an elite tool, but he has a lot of really good tools. His hit tool's above average, his power is above average, his speed's above average. And that speed really benefits him because he has really great instincts. He has a quick reaction time, and he's able to go ahead and use those instincts to steal a base when he needs to, or turn a single into a double, or go from second to third on a sacrifice fly. It's not going to be someone who's going to beat you on the base pass, but he'll be sneaky, 10, 15 steals a year. Someone that I think is going to be an impact player on the diamond, no matter what he does, simply because he has that speed. Granted, that doesn't really change his range. He did start as a shortstop as a freshman at Maryland, but I think long-term second base is where he's going to have to stay. He doesn't have that defensive range. He also has a little bit of a below average arm, so it's not something that teams should really be excited about if they're looking for a future shortstop. That hurts his value a little bit. Shortstop is an important position to play. The Cubs did draft him as a shortstop, so they're trying him out there as any team should. Shortstop is the most valuable position on the infield in terms of defense, but I think he is going to end up having to shift over to second base long term, which is fine. He projects to be an above average hitter there and a solid defender as well. I wouldn't be worried if I was a Cubs fan of him moving to second base, and you have Dansby Swanson locked up for a long time. You don't necessarily need to have a shortstop in your system to come up and play next year or in 2025 because you have Dansby Swanson there. I wouldn't be shocked to see him as one of the first people added once people start graduating off the list. You look at who's in Major League Baseball right now: Sal Frelick, Logan O'Hoppe, Andy Rodriguez, Tyler Soderstrom, Zach Geloff, Christian Encarnacion Strand. There's a lot of people going to graduate. I think Matt Shaw is going to be one of the people who ends up getting added to this list really quickly and is going to be a top 100 prospect, potentially even by the end of the month of August. The second player we're going to end up talking about is Andy Pages, an outfielder for the Dodgers, and someone who I think, if he wasn't hurt, would be in this top 100. If you look at what the MLB Pipeline people like Jonathan Mayo, Jim Callis have said, there's a lot of players, especially pitchers, who end up injured, and it's hard to rank them because you just don't know what their potential is. Pages, I think, is a bona fide top 100 prospect. He just ended up hurting his shoulder in his AAA debut, of course, one game in AAA, and he gets hurt on May 16th, and that required surgery to keep him out for the rest of the year. It is really unfortunate. He has a lot of potential. He is a plus power guy with a great arm, someone I think the Dodgers are really excited about, and this injury definitely derailed the fact that he potentially could have been playing in the major leagues this year. Granted, now would be about the time to get called up, and the Dodgers do have a solid outfield. They traded for some solid pieces, so I don't know if there's necessarily a spot for him. You look at someone like Michael Busch, an infielder who is absolutely tearing things up in AAA and should be called up, who just hasn't because there's no space. Andy Pages might have been in the same boat, but still, he's a really exciting prospect and someone I think in my top 100 still stays there despite the injury. In my opinion, his best tool is his arm, but that's not really exciting to talk about, so we'll table that discussion for a little bit later in the video and talk about his power, because his power is elite plus. He has the potential to go ahead and hit 35 to maybe even 40 home runs in the big leagues, and having someone like that in the middle of the Dodgers lineup, which is going to be incredibly potent for years to come with Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, and the swash of prospects they have right on the horizon, it's going to be really scary if you're a fan of another NL East team, and I'm sorry that you have to deal with the Dodgers again and again and again. Again, that shoulder surgery might actually have some negative impacts on his power, but what's really interesting is his power doesn't come from just raw strength or a really quick swing. It's a combination of everything. When you're talking about power, the main thing to look at is his swing because it is geared for lift, and he will go ahead and hit for a ton of power because of that. It's a lofty right-handed swing designed to go and lift balls into the air, which isn't a bad thing. That's what you do if you're a power hitter, but it is something that you have to be worried about. That is his swing. He's not going to be a contact guy. He'll hit for a decent enough average that he'll be okay if he doesn't hit for a ton of power, but he definitely projects to be a guy who's going to hit a lot of home runs, and his swing is geared for that. Not to mention, he has a lot of strength just naturally, which helps build into that more, and his swing is really quick. It has a lot of speed, and that just benefits him more in terms of power. So he has the makings of a guy who's not going to go ahead and have the potential to hit, let's say, 40 home runs a year and not reach that potential because he's missing a component. Andy Pages definitely has all the makings of a power hitter and someone who can hit for average as well. And that's something that any team could use. You always need a power hitter, a guy who's going to go ahead and drive in runs, and Pages definitely provides that for you. I already mentioned his arm strength. It is incredible. Again, we'll see how the shoulder impacts that, but he is going to gun down you left and right. Do not run on him. It is elite. His power is great, and we've talked about that. His arm strength is a whole step better, and I do not think you want to give him a shot if you're trying to tag up on a sac fly. He will gun you down, and you will be out. There's no question about that. I liken it to maybe prime heyday Ramon Laureano, if you remember the throw he made from Angels outfield when he caught the ball and threw it right back to first base. He's just elite. Yoenis Cespedes level, gun you down level arm. His speed isn't anything to write home about. He's not going to steal many bases. He's not going to go ahead and beat you on the base pass, which is fine. He doesn't need to. Most power hitters don't have that, so it's not the end of the world. He has lost a little bit of step as he's just kind of grown and matured. He is an international prospect signed for $300,000 in 2017 out of Cuba. So there is a lot of development and growth that happens between when you sign and now. I mean, at this point, it's been 6 years. So that's just kind of the nature of playing baseball and being an international prospect. He's on the 40-man roster, so expect him to kind of be progressed a little bit quicker. Based on how his recovery goes, I could definitely see him getting called up at the end of 2024 or potentially even being part of a trade piece in 2024. The Dodgers have a solid outfield, and although they don't have a ton of outfield prospects kind of coming up, Kendall George is their next one. He's a long way away. Jose Ramos is also a little bit away. He could potentially make an impact in 2024. I don't really see it though. So I would not be shocked if really they make a huge push to go ahead and either get him called up at the end of 2024 or to trade him in another deal and get some pieces back to try and win a championship in 2024, 2025, and beyond. We'll go ahead and continue with the injured player theme here with Mason Miller.
Swing and a miss on a high fastball, 100 miles an hour, right at the top of the zone.
Started 4 games for the struggling Oakland A's, but performed really well, keeping opponent average to 187, a whip under 1, and has also struck out more than he has in his pitch. As I mentioned, he is hurt right now, and that's really the main concern about Mason Miller. He has been hurt a lot, and right now it's with a mild UCL sprain, which for a pitcher, UCL is a very important part of their arm motion and the mechanisms that they use to pitch. So it is a little concerning, especially since he has been hurt a lot. But he really does have a lot of plus stuff that we'll get to in a second, and that's what really excites me.
1-2 to Teoscar Hernandez,
and he swings and misses. Isn't really performing well.
Hernandez will do that a lot, and that's the second strike.
He's on a rehab assignment right now. He just pitched for their single-A Stockton affiliate. Looked really good there. So I'm really excited for Mason Miller, and even though A's fans don't have a lot to be excited about right now,
and he got the call on the outside corner. Strike 3 called. Third strikeout for Miller. He's been terrific.
That team pretty bad.
Back into the batter's box, waiting the 3-2. Here it is.
But Mason Miller
swing and a miss, struck him out.
Potentially #1 pitcher
here 3-2
in the major leagues, and should he not get there, I could very easily see him be.
And he did, and he got him swinging. Nasty breaking ball.
Miller's main offense is his fastball.
Trying to get through 7. 0-2 pitch.
Got
him swinging.
A pitch that propels his rating very highly. That's part of the reason why I view him as a top 100 prospect. Is his fastball is absolutely devastating. It's hard to hit. It's hard to even make contact with the pitch that fast in general. But he has really great command of that pitch, and because of that, he's able to locate it where he needs to and get batters to go ahead and just swing and miss or just look because it's too fast and they can't react in time. His control of that fastball really does propel it to be an elite pitch. It's one of the better fastballs in all the minor leagues, and once he makes the major leagues officially to stay, it's going to be one of the best fastballs in the major leagues as well, which is really saying something. Again, he's 24, so he should have a little bit more refinement than your average prospect.
Locked in. Swing and a miss, struck him out. He struck out the side.
You've had the chance to watch him.
2 swinging, 1 looking. Nicely done by Mason Miller. Bottom of the 2nd coming up.
Some adversity in his life, and I think that's something that really goes to show the testament of a character and really takes a lot of determination, because you are dealing with a lot of mental anguish as a starting pitcher when there's 2 hits in a row. How do you bounce back and respond? There's a lot of pressure on a starting pitcher when they get into a pickle, especially because you don't expect a reliever to come in the 3rd inning to relieve you. He was a type 1 diabetic in 2018. He got diagnosed, and he weighed around 150 pounds, and he really got put on a diet and strength program and pushed through and bulked up and transferred from Waynesburg Community College to Gardner-Webb University in 2021 to go and increase his stock, and just dominated the competition at Gardner-Webb. And that led to the A's picking him in the 3rd round. Him putting in that work and the effort and overcoming adversity is something that I really admire, and I think something in a prospect that I would look for as a scout is someone who can go into the face of adversity, go ahead and overcome it. And obviously type 1 diabetes is something that you are going to have to deal with throughout your entire life. But Mason Miller is someone that has not overcome it, but stuck with it and said, I'm not going to let this hold me back. And that's something that I think we could all take as an advice in life in general. And as a prospect scouter, I think it's something that I look for in a prospect that has had that adversity. How do they handle it? And Mason Miller has done a great job of going ahead and managing his type 1 diabetes and becoming an effective starting pitcher in the process. His secondary pitch is a slider, which grades out as a plus pitch. It's becoming a little bit like a wipeout slider, a lot of horizontal movement, which is the kind of sliders I like watching as a baseball fan. They're not always the most effective when it comes to scouting and projecting a player, but they're fun to watch a player go ahead and whiff on a pitch that's 1.5 feet outside the zone. If you watch his slider, it does have a lot of movement, as I said, and it's something that hitters do tend to get off balance a lot with. It does tunnel decently well with his fastball, which can be difficult for hitters to go ahead and pick up, and now they're, again, swinging at a pitch 1.5 feet outside the strike zone. He's also been developing a changeup. There's a little bit of dissension among industry scouts whether that's going to be a plus pitch or it's just going to be another offering. And based on how he develops that pitch, will most likely determine whether he can really go ahead and stay as a starter or if he's going to have to move into that closer role. He has the build and the strength to potentially be a starter as long as he stays healthy, but a bullpen role might have to end up happening if he does end up going and getting hurt a little more often than one would really like to see. He'll have to end up in the bullpen at that point. But if he does end up staying a starter, if he can at least make the changeup a nice third offering, he'll have a good repertoire to go and stay as a, I think, potential number one pitcher, especially in Oakland, where they don't have a ton of pitching prospects. Ken Waldichuk hasn't looked great. JP Sears is looking okay, but isn't expected to be a top-of-the-line guy. Mason Miller could very easily be the guy who ends up being their number one starter. On another team, he'd probably slot in as a 2 or a 3, but a high-end 2 or a 3. So it's someone that I really like going forward, someone I think is a bona fide top 100 prospect if you take away the injury concern. And if he can go ahead and bring that changeup in, especially if he can bring it in and maybe he's not durable enough to stick in the rotation, and he has 3+ pitches in the bullpen, he's going to be a very dangerous player come at the back end of the rotation. We'll go ahead and go across the country now and look at the Tampa Bay Rays prospect Xavier Issac, a first baseman who they took out of high school in the first round of the 2022 draft to forgo his commitment to the University of Florida. He's someone that's really risen up a lot of prospects rankings recently, and if you're a dynasty baseball player, you've probably heard his name float around as someone who could enter that top 100 discussion at some point. I am personally very high on Xavier Issac. I don't know if he's the first player that MLB Pipeline adds to their top 100 list. I think there's a couple guys ahead of him, but personally, I think he's a top 100 prospect, probably in that 90 to 95 range. Again, you're probably not going to see that on every list. This is my personal preference. I think he is a guy who will easily be a top 100 prospect. As you have with a lot of first basemen, you're not going to have a guy who's going to steal a lot of bases. His running speed is significantly below average, but he hits for average and he has a lot of power, and he hasn't really tapped into that yet. He has a huge amount of raw power, but it's just not showing in the game 100%. Right now in Single A, he only has 13 home runs of the year, but he's only 19. He has a lot of time to grow and develop into his body, and the Tampa Bay Rays are one of the best developmental organizations in all of Major League Baseball. If anyone can go and make the most of Xavier Issac, it's 100% the Tampa Bay Rays. He only has 13 home runs so far this year in Single A, which isn't a horrible number, but a lot of people expected him to be a power bat, especially because the Rays took him really before anyone else expected him to be taken, 29th overall in the 22 draft. So there is a lot of development left to go, but in terms of his power, he'll be okay. He's batting around 270 right now, which isn't a horrible clip, but he has a lot of projection. A lot of scouts didn't expect him to hit 270 at this level at age 19. Expected that batting average to be a lot lower, and that really goes to show you how much the Rays have focused on his bat speed and exit velocity and focus on making hard contact instead of settling out for power in his swing. He's making those adjustments because as he goes up and progresses, he'll make sure that the power comes naturally instead of him just trying to go for it. That'll help his batting average, help him drive in more runs, and at the end of the day, it'll make him hit maybe a couple less home runs, but the power numbers will be comparable because he has that raw power and that raw strength. They'll go in and drive in runs. He's limited to first base. He's not the best defender at first base, so he could become something like a G-Man Choi type where you DH a lot and you play first base if you need to. I'd hate that for him. I think he is good enough to get in the lineup every day, and he could really work on his defense, especially because he's only 19. But he is limited to first base, so that's just something to consider when you're kind of looking at him from a fantasy perspective or from just a prospect perspective. First base is kind of a weaker position in terms of the value you give to your team. You're not the best defensively, and unless you have someone like Matt Olson who's able to go and scoop up anything, it's hard to be an elite defensive first baseman and get that recognition. Xavier Issac's not going to be the best defender, but he's going to stay in because of his bat, and he's really surprised a lot of scouts with just how good he's been in 2023. Again, the numbers don't jump off the page, but he's doing a lot better than a lot of people expected, and that's something that really excites me. The fact he's in the Rays organization probably helps a little bit too, but I think he has a lot of potential, and he could be the first guy that I want to see out of all first base prospects off the board. Kyle Manzardo is probably number one. I wouldn't be shocked if Xavier Issac's number 2 on my list. I haven't put it together, but I think he's that good, and I think he has the potential to be a top first baseman in Major League Baseball. The player I'm most surprised isn't in the top 100 has to be Ryan Clifford, the New York Mets outfielder who they just acquired from the Houston Astros, the Justin Verlander trade. He was the Astros' 11th round pick in the 2022 draft, and he only fell that far for 2 reasons. Number 1, signability. For those who don't know, the first 10 rounds of the MLB draft is where you get your pool from. Everyone else is scheduled to get $150,000 as their max. Anything more counts against their pool. And because he was a high schooler with a really strong commitment to Vanderbilt, they weren't sure that they wanted to give him a ton of money to go and leave that commitment, especially given the fact that he didn't have a great senior circuit of going against other high school competition before the MLB draft. Teams just let him slide, and the Astros scooped him up in the 11th round and signed him for over $1 million more than the minimum requirement for an 11th round pick. So they took $1 million out of their bonus pool to sign Ryan Clifford in the 2022 MLB draft. He's really climbed up prospects rankings this year. Again, as an 11th round pick, people have that little concern and that predisposed bias. How can an 11th round pick be that good? But he was. Again, he fell for signability reasons and just the fact he didn't have the best time leading up to the draft in terms of how he showed out. But he's really dominated so far in the minor leagues. He's already in high A at only 20 years old and had a 903 OPS before he was traded away to the New York Mets, again in that Justin Verlander deal this trade deadline. He has a really mature approach, especially for someone his age at this level. He focuses on hard contact instead of going and just swinging for the fences, especially because he has a lot of power. That's his best tool. He's going to hit for power in the major leagues. I see someone like a Pete Alonso in his swing. The swings are a little different, but that kind of prototypical player where he gets on base, he hits well enough, but the power is something that really jumps off the page. And when you look at someone like Pete Alonso, he's always up there in the home run leaderboard for the NL and even all of Major League Baseball as well. I don't think Clifford will have that kind of power, but he will definitely be relatively close. I could see him a 30 home run season, maybe a 35 at his peak, which is definitely not a number to scoff at. He has a really mature approach to the plate, and that helps him because he goes and focuses on hard contact. He doesn't swing for the fences every time he's up to the plate. He lets that approach go ahead and work in counts, let the pitcher make a mistake, and that's when he punishes. He's not swinging for the fences every time. He's using his bat speed, he's using his strength, which is only projected to increase as he grows and develops, as most high school players are. But scouts are really excited to see how he grows and develops because he can add on a lot of muscle to build that power. And that left-handed stroke is going to do a great job of getting him a lot of home runs and getting him on base. Right now, his main concern is he's striking out a lot. Again, he's only 20 years old at high A, so it's not something to be super worried about, but it is something to note that he is striking out about 30% of the times right now. So he needs to do a better job of especially recognizing off-speed pitches, which is an issue for a lot of players as they go to the next level, especially high schoolers. When you're facing high school competition, you're not always seeing the best stuff. Pitchers who just get by because it's hard to hit a changeup when you're young. So now that Clifford's seeing a little bit more advanced competition, he's struggling a little bit, but that's not something to be worried about. It's something a lot of high school players end up going through. He's probably going to slow down a little bit. His defense isn't great, which is why some scouts think he's going to end up at first base. I think he'll probably end up in left field because he has an above average arm. It's not a great arm, but it's at least above average. And when you're at first base, you don't really have a use for an arm. So I think he'll end up at left field because his defense is a little stingy and he needs to work on his routes a little bit. But if he does end up at first base, especially if the Mets do end up moving on from Pete Alonso, which I don't see happening, but could, he will definitely be a first baseman in the near future. He won't be up for a couple more years, but it's someone that Mets fans should really be excited about and someone they have gotten very familiar with after the Verlander trade. So those were 5 players who I think are going to crack the top 100 list sooner rather than later, but there's still a ton of other players, so I'll go ahead and give a quick list on them. For instance, when you look at the next player up on all teams' MLB Pipeline top 30s of who would be the next player on their top 100 list, there's 12 recent draft picks, and I expect a lot of them to go ahead and get the call up sooner rather than later, because this was a stacked draft class, and just because there's a lot of injuries and unknowns and a lot of people ready to graduate, I wouldn't be shocked to see a lot of these people get added on. I think Tommy Troy is someone who is very exciting, a first-round pick from the Diamondbacks. He's likely to get called up sometime soon. Same with Hurston Waldrop, a Florida Gator in Atlanta's organization. He's their second-ranked prospect and has done a very, very good job so far in Single A. The Blue Jays' first-round pick, Arjun Namala, 20th overall, is a shortstop that a lot of people are excited about out of Strawberry Crest High School in Florida. Same with Nolan Shanuel, who is now going and playing in the major leagues already. He probably won't crack the top 100 because I think he'll graduate before that, but he's someone that if he doesn't, will probably end up at the back end of that list starting 2024. There's also a lot of players who were first-round picks last year, like Cam Collier of the Cincinnati Reds, or Sterling Thompson of the Colorado Rockies, and a lot of other interesting prospects that could really make a big impact. Thank you again for watching. I really appreciate it. If you like more content like this, there's going to be more videos that pop up on the side of the screen. Go ahead and watch those, and go ahead and hit that subscribe button too if you're interested in more prospect-related baseball content for your favorite team.